All right, welcome to America This Week. I'm Matt Taibbi.
And I'm Walter Kern.
And Walter, let's just go right into it.
I know we're loaded for bear.
Loaded for bear. Let's go to SOT 3. And maybe let's play this one a few times. This is something that happened. This is from over the weekend. And this is from the Zoran rally.
This city was built by the Irish escaping famine, Italians fleeing fascism, Jews escaping Holocaust, Black Americans fleeing slavery and Jim Crow, Latinos seeking a better life, Native people standing for themselves, Asian Americans coming together in Queens, in Brooklyn, in the Bronx, in Manhattan, in Staten Island, in this country, in a vision to build the freest, toughest, and greatest city on earth.
Let's do it again.
This city was built by the Irish escaping famine, Italians fleeing fascism, Jews escaping Holocaust, Black Americans fleeing slavery and Jim Crow, Latinos seeking a better life, Native people standing for themselves, Asian Americans coming together in Queens, in Brooklyn, in the Bronx, in Manhattan, in Staten Island, in this country, in a vision to build the freest, toughest, and greatest city on earth.
Okay.
She left out Dutch merchants.
Oh, we forgot that.
She forgot the Dutch merchants.
Dutch merchants. We forgot those. The Irish got to mention though.
Not many people escaped the Holocaust, lady. And the Italians I know from New York got there long before fascism dawned. But aside from getting every single thing wrong, let's see, that was a rousing piece of illiteracy.
I think let's have a safe word for this broadcast, like in case either one of us wants to cut to that SOT in the middle of any part of the show. I don't know.
Yeah.
Membrane, cucumber. Like what's a word we can agree on?
I think it should be like, FM radio disc jockeys who have a sound they can play, like yeah.
Exactly.
Just push it. Yeah.
Oh man, like Harry Shearer in Wayne's World. Remember that?
Yeah.
He that was great. Okay. We've been kind of like resisting the making fun of the Zoran phenomenon thing.
Right.
But we just can't go there. We can't leave it alone anymore, especially after we did a whole most of a show last week on the Plattner thing in Maine,
right,
and left out the absolute best detail, which is that he went to Hotchkiss.
Yeah, Hotchkiss isn't just any private school, by the way. But Matt, you sprung. You see, remember, I was in the pits of writing my book. You were coming back from your concussion. Mm-hmm. I didn't know who he was when we started the show. My only exposure to him was what we played, and I went off on a absolute gypsy intuitive rant against him, not knowing he'd gone to Hotchkiss, not knowing the whole thing was a fabrication, but calling it out as a fake macho trolling stunt, the Nazi tattoo that would allow him to become, Tim Waltz with teeth, which is what he is. He actually makes me nostalgic for Tim Waltz in certain ways.
No, he's the new improved. It's like the what was the in the Terminator? They had the HKs, the hunter killer models, and then they went up and they had the better ones. Like the old ones had rubberized skin; you could tell the difference. But Plattner is the improved version because if you listen to him, actually it's not on our list, but can we get Plattner's launch video? It's in my article from today. Because he's sort of convincing and he calls himself a working class Mainer. right?
He didn't convince me for 5 seconds, Matt. I was into him within a moment of seeing his face. I saw exactly what stunt they were pulling, exactly what ingredients they were using. Like I said, let's get us a Bob Dylan, like at the record company, except it's, let's get us I don't know, a Trump or something. I mean, is that him with his sea bag or something?
Yeah. So let's just play like the first 30 seconds because it's kind of it's hilarious. It's awesome.
I have never met people who are more hard scrabble. Place that requires you to work like 2 or 3 different jobs. We have watched this state become essentially unlivable for working class people, and it makes me deeply angry.
Hotchkiss.
Hotchkiss.
Dude, he reminds me a little of Bigfoot.
Going overseas, farming oysters to feed my community, diving to lend a hand to other fishermen, trying to start a family. But everywhere I've gone, it seems
Trying
like
to start a family?
Yeah, exactly. What does that mean?
I don't
Can't get it
know.
up?
Is he missing?
Yeah.
And what is
destroying our environment, driving our families into poverty, and crushing the middle class?
Oh my God! Look at this thing.
In the Army. I'm not afraid to name an enemy.
All right.
It's the oligarchy.
Dude,
It's the billionaires who pay for it.
And then again on the
it's so
on
much
the
worse than what we looked at last time. I didn't realize all this Bigfoot stuff. The kettlebells and the trying to start a family. What does that mean? That his wife won't sleep with him, or does that mean,
or that they're it's like catch-22, like they haven't gotten the right instructions or something like that. But I mean, his launch tweet says, "I'm a veteran oysterman and working class Mainer who's seen this state become unlivable for working people." And he went to Hotchkiss. His dad is a corporate lawyer, and his grandfather is like an icon of architectural modernism who designed the Ford Foundation Center in New York. And
Central Casting has worked hard, but it can't keep up with American jadedness in the social media age. I don't know how likely it is that this guy will win the nomination, but
he's going to win.
Making Susan Collins look authentic is fucking amazing. I mean, which she is. I mean, she's an authentic Republican, moderate, whatever. But I think she's actually more man than he is. I think she'll take him apart. I love the idea of trying to start a family, though. I'm snagged on that.
I'm trying to start a family. Like the voice is amazing.
Like he pounds on the door. Let me in. I want to start a family.
And the thing that's so funny about it, I mean, Walter, do you have any Hotchkiss friends?
No, that's far above my pay grade.
I was gonna say that's above my pay. Like
yep.
I went to Concord Academy. Caroline Kennedy went to Concord Academy. Sebastian Junger, like all of these sort of upscale.
My old girlfriend Susan Minot went to Concord Academy. But that, Matt, come on, is
I know that's way down here compared to Hotchkiss is where the CIA directors send their kids.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. And that's why we have let's say it again, central casting candidate for the Senate in Maine. And by central casting, I mean central, because this guy was created in a laboratory. He was probably created long ago in a laboratory. It's not like it was a sudden shift. They encouraged him. I think they keep various trains running at the same time. How's that Plattner coming along? How's Bigfoot coming along? They spotted him at 12. It's like spotting pitching talent. You know what I mean?
That's right. Yeah. Who's the basketball player who was spotted when like Cooper Flagg, another great Mainer,
right?
Cooper Flagg, the last year's #1 pick in the draft. He was spotted when he was about 11 or 10 or so. They bring him along, and he was look, he's a political talent. I can't say that I went to high school with anybody who would believably be able to pull off the military Nazi tat wearing act.
Wrecking ball, dancing to Wrecking Ball. As I said, that was the giveaway. He's dancing to Wrecking Ball in his own Oppo video that came from his own family wedding.
Right.
When the Oppo comes from your own family video collection, you can be sure that the fix is it, But anyway, it takes a certain combination of savvy, ambitious, and stupid to do these roles justice. And, I was going to say, going back to AOC, anybody who can scream out historical facts about the settlement of, New York City that are each one laughable. I mean, escaping the Holocaust. I want to see the movie about all the people who break out of Dachau and go to New York City. Fascism in Italy was, of course, decades after the main flow of immigrants. But she just sounds like I don't know who she appeals to. At this point,
the bouncing thing is also amazing. It's a great rhetorical tactic.
He fulfills an archetype, but what she's imitating, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's odd, definitely. But whatever. She got elected, so good for her. But the real news this weekend, and we've been talking around it, is that look, there's been kind of an uncomfortable schism within the Democratic Party since the rise of Zoran Mamdani, where some of the senior leadership has expressed some discomfort with the idea of somebody who talks about seizing the means of production, becoming the mayor of New York City. And finally, this weekend, there was kind of a capitulation among some of the major Democrats. There was a knee-bending ceremony at the rally that we just showed. That
if you can't beat them, blow them.
right. Exactly. Yes. So not only did AOC sort of give her little intersectionality rewrite of New York's history, leaving out the Dutch merchants, but Governor Kathy Hochul, who has been, let's just say, anxious about the Zoran phenomenon, among other things, because it's going to cost the state like an assload of money if he actually gets elected. She gave a speech. So let's look at SOT 2.
They always forget this about us. When we get punched, we fight back, and we fight back hard. Trump's America runs on fear and cruelty and division. But New York, we run on hope and compassion and optimism that never leaves us. So I say we are the state that does not back down, and I'm going to be working closely with Mayor Zoran Mamdani. But you know what you should take inspiration from? Think about the fact that every single time people have forced him to endure hatred and threats, trying to use his faith or his name as a weapon. You know what he's done? He doesn't get out in the gutter with everybody else. He rises up with grace and courage and grit. That's the kind of leader we need. That's what we need. Because that Islamophobia and bigotry.
Okay. All right.
Well,
we get it.
Okay. Here,
Yeah.
I want to point out the change in graphic style for their campaign posters. Those are not the colors, and that is not the mode in which you usually see campaign literature posters. It looks very Idiocracy I mean, it's like,
Oh my God, you're right. Can we get Dwayne Hector Elizondo Mountain Dew
Right.
Camacho? We gotta see what that looks like again.
What I love about this moment for the Democrats is how many people who don't look like they've ever maybe had a physical struggle with another human being are using these fighting words like Newsom and her now. And I mean, they look like the biggest collection of lightweights, but they're screaming. Yeah, exactly. Dude, that is exactly what this reminds me of. I'm sorry. What a prophet. What a prophet.
Terry Crews. Oh my God. No, and that font that they're using, it's very I'm trying to remember what channel it was in the old public access and New York cable.
Right.
Like Channel J, was it?
Well, it's a bomb. It's a bomb blast. It's
Right,
a bomb
right,
blast.
right.
It's meant to evoke, a grenade of, idealistic socialist fervor going off in the faces of the fascists. And New York being not for sale is one of the most peculiar slogans I've ever heard. I mean, the city of Wall Street is not for sale. If any city is for sale, all the other cities have already been purchased, I guess. New York, though, is fearing what? That Donald Trump with his crypto billions is going to buy them? What does that mean?
New York is not for sale. Yeah, it's unclear. We could get. I mean, I haven't done, frankly, enough studying on.
Who, in other words, who is the enemy? Is it just
the oligarchy
out of New York City? This is going to be fun to watch.
It's going to be awesome. So okay, so that's what I mean. Let's listen to Zoran's little clip. This is Sot 1 here.
Here is what we stand for, my friends. We are going to freeze the rent for more than 2 million rent-stabilized tenants and use every resource at our disposal to build housing for everyone who needs it.
It's amazing this hasn't been done already.
We are going to eliminate the fare on every single bus line and make what are currently the slowest buses in the nation move around this city with ease.
Faster buses.
And we are going to create universal childcare at no cost to parents.
So that one, I'm like, wait, what?
So New
I'm
Yorkers
surprised that
can
hasn't been
raise
done
their
already.
family in the city they love. Together, New York, we're going to freeze the. Together, New York, we're going to make buses fast and. Together, New York, we're going to deliver universal. We will make our city one where every person who calls it home can live a dignified life.
Okay, all right.
No New Yorker.
Matt, okay. First of all, why does he have that picture behind him? You know what I mean? That is the most contrived group.
I know. Yeah.
Fast.
Every candidate does that, to be fair.
But fast free buses. Listen, New Yorkers are going to have to run after the buses. The buses are not slowed down by the traffic lights will only let them go so fast. And the need to pull over for passengers will only let them go so fast. This is in the zone of surrealism now.
Well, so what is at the heart of the faster buses promise? I'm trying to. Is it fewer cars on the street, or what are they going to do?
I don't know. Freeze rent, fast free buses, free childcare. I have family who live in New York City. I believe they are pretty much taxed to the brim there, as far as I can tell. They are paying prices in stores I don't know what happened to the free grocery stores or the socialist grocery stores that he was promising a while back, if that's fallen off the agenda or not. But my fear is not that Zoran won't be able to deliver on his promises or will bankrupt the world with them, but that he is a lightweight who's going to be eaten for lunch by the real old New York interests. I feel like one union boss with a little bit of savvy could take that guy, put him in a corner forever. I just don't think he's ready for it beyond all the rhetoric.
Well, I think he's ready as a performer. I think for sure. His marketing is very good. And look, he's certainly better than AOC when it comes to that. And she's become a credible possibility for a national candidacy. But what's so fascinating about this? So he gives a speech, free bus fare, okay, whatever. I'm not sure where the faster thing comes in. That something called congestion pricing plays a role in that. I'm not sure what that is. Obviously there's the city-run stores that he's proposed. Whatever. I mean, it's probably not going to work. But I'm all for it. If you want to try it, it's fine.
To 25-year-olds, it sounds amazing that none of these things have been tried, except that they all have been. But, let's not age ourselves or date ourselves by reminding people of that. I just feel that, when Donald Trump came into office, he was checkmated, frankly, by whatever they call the deep state or the permanent bureaucracy or the power elite. This guy's not going to be able to load the stapler on his new desk before people with far more experience and far more savvy who can play 10D chess, and New York is full of them.
Oh, yeah. You have to be a killer of the highest order to survive New York.
Right. Like there are 10 interests and lined up to be the one that put that guy in a headlock within 7 seconds. And whoever is able to get to the head of that line is going to run New York. It's not going to be Zoran Mamdani, I don't think.
Okay, but what's fascinating about this, though, is what does the Democratic Party do? Because if you go and look up, so free childcare or childcare that does not cost anything for all parents in New York,
right?
Hochul estimates that would be a minimum of $7 billion from the state that would have to be paid to New York City,
and all these trustworthy child care workers are going to come out of the woodwork too. I mean, what a jobs program! Everybody's going to be, have 3 jobs employed by the government to help everybody else. I mean, I don't know where they're going to get all these people.
So, it raises the question, though: are Democrats going to sacrifice state houses in order to save high-profile cities? Right. In other words,
that's not what I see happening.
You don't think that's going to happen? So what's going to happen? He's going to promise childcare, then blame it on the state when it doesn't get funded. Like what?
I see a much more dynamic situation and a short-term situation here than that. In other words, looking down the line at the political ramifications of this kind of candidate and this kind of governance is something I'm unwilling to do yet, because I think we're looking at something with a much closer target at the midterms next year, and a kind of showdown that I feel in my gut is coming rather quickly between, you see, I don't think they'll let him go long enough to fail. I think the uprising will happen first. I don't think that anybody expects, certainly nobody who's been around, that this guy is going to perform on these in any, tangible way. And nor will they let him as a Trump is hoping, completely fall down the stairs. We're looking at within the next 6 months, I think, a street movement that they've been calling for, born on the winds of revolution, against a crackdown that they know is coming from Trump. An ICE crackdown, a legal crackdown on the, plotters from the Russiagate period, a crime crackdown, and so on. I feel much more like the battlefield is being prepared for a rather garish conflict than we're seeing, the evolution of American politics in the long term. That's what I see.
So Andrew Sullivan, he wrote a column about Mamdani. I think he calls it Magic Mamdani Theory. And he essentially agrees with you. I'm going to just read a passage from it. And he is a near perfect, he's talking about Mamdani, and he is a near perfect foil for Trump. Queer liberation means defund the police, he once tweeted, though he says he no longer wants to defund the cops. It's the kind of 2020 slogan almost designed to ensure MAGA control of the national discourse forever. And if I were a showrunner on the Trump show, Mamdani would be central to provoking the kind of real fascist putsch that Trump and Miller are itching for if they can find a suitable provocation. Mamdani is that provocation. He will go to war with ICE in New York City, and Trump will go to war with him and broadcast it every day. Now, this is a believable scenario, actually.
I find it very believable. I wouldn't call what Trump and Miller are itching for a fascist putsch necessarily, because I actually don't think that our politics is really about ideology right now. I think it's about corruption, and I think it's about who's going to hold the reins of power in terms of making things work or not making them work. I as much as they want to portray this as some sort of, Christian nationalist uprising against, socialism and keep it in your old European terms, I don't think so. I think it's about the massive amount of money that's been going into government and the massive racketeering that comes with it, and the inefficiency and the national security issues around getting our industrial base back and things like that. So I'm not as worried as Andrew that the Republican pounce thing is our main concern. I think our main concern is going to be, how do we ride out what I expect to be a very rugged conflict that has been a long time in the making and will involve, the continuing deportation of people, the maybe the criminal trials of former presidential candidates, certainly probably former CIA directors and things like that. And as I watched CBS News this weekend and saw how absolutely exercised people are about the light touch of Bari Weiss on CBS News, I realized that we're looking at a capturing the radio station scenario. That everybody's worried about what instruments they have in hand for, I think, an end game for politics as we've known it in America.
Right.
The Republican Party has just as much lost control of its traditional, its traditional leverage as has the Democrat Party. We now have populist wings in both parties that seem to be ascendant, that are, and so they're gonna go up against each other, because only one, when the game is the people, that's a much more acute conflict than the long-term evolution of American, temperament and society.
Yeah, no, I agree. You referenced the freak out over Margaret Brennan. Well, we might as well show that clip. I think it's SOT 8. Let's see. This is Margaret Brennan on CBS interviewing Hakeem Jeffries, who is one of those people, by the way, who previously had some skepticism about Zoran. This little clip unbelievably promoted a wig out of cosmic proportions on social media, as if it was evidence of the complete inversion of journalistic values. But let's take a look.
I want to ask you about something you said. You said Democrats, there are no election deniers on our side of the aisle. You said that back in January. But recently, you've been using the term rigged elections in reference to the upcoming midterms. Democrats were appalled when President Trump used language like that. How do you justify using that now? Doesn't that undermine faith for voters? You need to show up.
No, I've been using that term in the context of Donald Trump's unprecedented effort to gerrymander congressional maps in a partisan fashion all across the country in order to rig the midterm elections and deny the ability of the American people to actually decide who should be in the majority as it relates to the House of Representatives.
You know, Democrats are also going through gerrymandering and redistricting.
No. Well, Democrats are going to push back aggressively to make sure that we have fair maps across the country, not partisan gerrymandering, which Republicans have initiated in state after state after state.
Okay. I mean,
first of all, we see what an actor she is. I mean, she can play any role.
Yeah, we might as well show that, right? Let's show what she looked like in a previous incarnation. Should we do that? Sure. I think that's number 9. I think this is her going after Marco Rubio on speech after the Munich business.
I want to ask you about what happened in Munich, Germany at the security conference. Vice President Vance gave a speech, and he told U.S. allies that the threat he worries about the most is not Russia. It is not China. He called it the threat from within, and he lectured about what he described as censorship, mainly focusing, though, on including more views from the right. He also met with the leader of a far-right party known as the AfD, which, as you know, is under investigation and monitoring by German intelligence because of extremism. What did all of this accomplish other than irritating our allies?
Why would our allies or anybody be irritated by free speech and by someone giving their opinion? We are, after all, democracies.
Well, he was standing in a country where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide. And he met with the head of a political party that has far-right views and some historic ties to extreme groups. The context of that was changing the tone of it. And you know that the censorship was specifically about the right.
No, I have to disagree with you. Free speech was not used to conduct a genocide. The genocide was conducted by an authoritarian Nazi regime that happened to also be genocidal because they hated Jews and they hated minorities and they hated those that they had a list of people they hated, but primarily the Jews.
They really let her improvise, don't they? I mean, I'm surprised. They think that she's good enough to be allowed to, go out there and really ad lib, and she can do it apparently from both sides. So,
hey, I was gonna say, I mean, that's I'm trying to think of who's the famous anchor person from Buffalo that I'm losing my mind, whose name I'm forgetting. Anyway, but it wasn't exactly like the blistering vivisection of a hardcore interviewer from ages past. But either way, like if a politician having to answer a couple of tough questions and maybe winning the exchange is, the death of media.
She did better in that one than she did with Rubio. Dude, that must be like watching your life pass before your eyes for certain people. It's like turning on Rachel Maddow and having her say, Charlie Kirk was a martyr. A man who's, like what? They're seeing the puppets suddenly, mouth new lines. That you see, we make fun of how small that mainstream media has shrunken, and we make fun of how little influence it seems to have in a lot of circles in which it used to have a lot of influence. But for the people that prize that asset, it is the premier asset. And to see it starting to slip away must be freaking terrifying.
I guess so. I mean, it's just bizarre to watch. But this, I do think this is a fascinating moment for the Democratic Party, because, as you say, this is what happened to the Republican Party, but like 10 years later, right? And
when you watch Madonna, do you ever get caught up in it for a moment? You know, maybe you correct yourself. I do. I do. I'm like, wow, I forgot how much the hope of free, fast buses and free childcare and, you know, affordable apartments as deigned by the government. Yeah, that's appealing. I mean, part of my younger self and just goes, why haven't we done that yet? You know, for a second. So he will glide on the fantasy for a short amount of time. But I don't think, like you say, the Democratic Party has to do anything if it's like the Chuck Schumer wing, but sit back and watch these people go to battle before they're exposed as incompetent, overpromising, and so on.
See, I don't know. I mean, like, I voted for Bernie Sanders once upon a time. I was in favor of Medicare for all, but you can't have that if you don't have a border policy, right? Which is a thing that Bernie used to talk about. Like, you can't have social programming that's expensive and no control over the border and total amnesty and all these other things. There has to be a nation that is defined before you can have national programming. I just don't think that Mamdani's promised everything in all directions, including, you know, on the immigration front, is going to work. But whatever. But you're right. It does. It's going to sound appealing to a lot of people. But there are other things that are going to make it.
College graduates, it will sound appealing to, because they still haven't figured out where money comes from. And I mean, certain kinds, affluent college graduates. But I don't know that, like I say, this is a real political platform. It's like he didn't leave anything out.
No, I know. I know. And look, there are other things about Mamdani that are just right in Trump's wheelhouse. Should we play? Let's play the aunt clip. This is I guess it's SOT 7. Oh no, wait, no, is it number 6? I'm sorry. This is from the October 24th. He's talking about an aunt in New York.
I want to use this moment to speak to the Muslims of New York City. I want to speak to the memory of my aunt.
What?
Who stopped taking the subway after September 11th because she did not feel safe in her hijab.
Okay. All right.
Matt, you wrote about how much you resent that.
I mean, look, I lived in New York for most of the 2000s. It seemed to me that the city came together in kind of an extraordinary way after that disaster, that there were extraordinary expressions of tolerance on all sides from all the different faiths. That, you know, there was there obviously was a surge of hate incidents, but it wasn't anything like you would have seen in, say, I don't know, Moscow or in some other part of the world. I mean, I think New York did a very good job of keeping the city together, and the the Muslim population of New York is more than doubled since 9/11. It's not exactly a hostile place to Islam.
Matt, I was there within 2 weeks. I used to work for GQ magazine, and I was there within 2 weeks, embedding myself in the Muslim community, especially over in New Jersey, to write about what he's claiming. It wasn't as he says
at all. I don't remember that at all.
Yeah.
And look, the notion that someone might, what were their nasty looks?
We can't speak to people's fears, can we?
Right.
I mean,
no, we can't.
but what the main thing that I get from that little press conference is Americans no longer expect even the semblance of authenticity in their political performances. I mean, that whole stuff.
I know.
It's interesting how churchy Democrats get in politics. You know what I mean? That there was a piety and a kind of a sacred feeling around that moment as he expressed it. But maybe it's social media, but you used to expect a better acting job from people. Now you just expect a sincere acting job. Like, yeah, I know he's acting. Yeah, I know he's making it up. Aren't we all? We're all on Instagram. We're all on Facebook. Of course we are. But he's doing the right acting. He's doing the acting.
He's acting for the right reasons.
Yeah.
Right. Now, there has been speculation about apparently one of his aunts has a LinkedIn page that suggests she was in Tanzania during the 2000s, but we don't know how many aunts he has, and there hasn't been any confirmation that I know of that aunt was non-existent. So we probably, I don't know. I think we should probably stay away from that for the moment. But still, even if that story were true, even if he had a relative who experienced unpleasantries on the subway.
But maybe it is true. Because, just because you feared something didn't mean it was happening. You know what I mean? I might, if I was a Muslim hijab wearing woman, have been afraid that there would be a backlash. I'm telling you, it didn't really come in the form that he's suggesting it did. But, people can fear anything.
No, absolutely. And but you would never, even if it's true, you would never, in even 5 years ago, no person running for mayor of New York City could have even suggested distantly that Muslims were any kind of victim of 9/11. That would be the kind of thing that would be more disqualifying than, Donald Trump's I like people who don't get captured line about John McCain. I mean, that would be like an instantly disqualifying thing, and that's why it's so interesting. It's sort of a parallel phenomenon. These are like two different varieties of politics that are popping up. He seems to be immune to the stuff that kills normal politicians, and or am I wrong? Or
I think that normal politicians have gone, the way of the dodo. We're starting to see frankly constructed persona, which don't hide the fact they're constructed. And they're kind of like a wrestling team, or really it is like wrestling in the sense that, like, they're playing a role, but they're playing a role that appeals to you, the one that you want to get behind. And we're dodos from the age of sincerity and authenticity. And these are people who come from the generation that rents a Lamborghini for a day and takes a bunch of pictures on Instagram. And it isn't a sin what they're seeing, like it is maybe for me. What they're seeing is a race car that they want to see win, and it's covered with fancy stickers. And but as I say again, I don't think his performance or lack of it on these promises is going to be what this is all about. I think this is going to be about getting a big win for the new democratic socialist, idea, and bringing it into conflict with Trump as he tries to retroactively restructure what he believes was a corrupt system.
Let's listen to Bernie, who obviously endorsed Zoran. I think it's top 5.
New York must have a mayor who represents the working families of this city, not the billionaire class. The reason why this campaign has generated so much interest around the world and so much excitement is that people want to know the answer to one very simple question, and that is, in the year 2025, when the people on top have never ever had so much economic and political power, is it possible for ordinary people, for working class people to come together and defeat those oligarchs? You're damn right we can.
Okay, they're acting like it's the 1930s. This is like a Clifford Odets play. This is like Waiting for Lefty. Strike, strike, strike. Dude, they have been so solidly the party of affluence and professionalism and lawyers and doctors and academia and the upper middle class for so long that I can't believe what I'm seeing. You know, it's like a little bit of a psychotic break where, you know, a dad thinks that he's a, you know, I don't know, Casanova or something, and starts coming around his wife like that. You know, it's role playing.
Well, yeah, but this is what I think is so interesting, right? So the Democratic Party, we're old enough, Walter, to have watched the evolution of both parties in some really interesting directions over the course of the last 30 or 40 years. And if we had gone back, let's say 1992, I think the last time I looked at this, so back then, probably the top 50 richest congressional districts in the country, they would have been 65% Republican or so, right? Like the basically rich districts were much more likely to be Republican back then. And the Democratic Party was much more solidly the party of sort of working or middle class people at that time.
Yeah.
Since then, there has been this transition, and it accelerated significantly in the mid 2000s and around the Obama period. If you watch what's happened since 2008, and then especially after 2016, now the script is almost completely flipped. Almost all of the rich districts are Democrats. But what's interesting about that is that this has coincided with this move toward the real left, right? Which is where they weren't. In other words, the Democrats, when they back in 1972, when there was another sort of quasi-leftist in McGovern running, that was much more of a working class expression, don't you think? I mean, the Democratic Party was not the party of the wealthy back then.
I grew up in Minnesota, the Democratic Farmer Labor Party, Hubert Humphrey, Eugene McCarthy, etc. So I saw the real version of what these people are, alluding to, what they're trying to, play act. But it was a very different group of people with very different sensibilities. They'd come up through union movements. They really represented, like in Minnesota, the Iron Range and the farmer and so on. But this is now the party of the managerial class. Any honest sociological, demographic analysis of the Democratic Party's nature right now is that this is the managerial class pretending to be the revolutionary class. And that's, I mean, I'm not.
But is that what's really happening though? Because what I think is happening is that did happen with Clinton, right? Like you saw the unions were completely routed under Clinton.
Right.
Routinely since Clinton, you will find the big unions supporting the candidate who is least union friendly in the primaries, right? In return for being closer to the White House. So you'd see whether it was Gephardt or Kucinich or whoever, like they would skip that person and support the John Kerrys and so on. But now I think what's happening is that sort of managerial class version of the Democrats is being forced back into genuine leftist politics, I think, or at least the appearance of it. I don't know. Which is it?
Well, I mean, in politics, people try to make dreams come true. So whether it's fantasy or reality, in some ways doesn't matter. You get there however you get there, saying whatever you need to say, and then you do what you can. But what I'm impressed by in terms of comparing this crew to what I would say were the old school leftist Democrats is the old school leftist Democrat were the product of machines, of city machines, of party machines. They used patronage and all sorts of techniques to maintain and consolidate their power with the real working class. I don't know if these people have those same ties. I don't know. I mean, public workers unions are very powerful, but these are not people who came up out of that. This is not Hubert Humphrey.
No, that's what I mean. That's true. You're right. Yes.
These folks have no natural ties to the group that they're talking about. I mean, he is a complete play acting upper middle class son of privilege, frankly.
And, right. A director and a socialist professor at Princeton, right?
Can they afford for him to fail, I guess, is my big question. Can they afford to see him go down in flames? Because the traditional trajectory for somebody like this who overpromises on the free everything side is that when they can't deliver, they have to blame somebody. It's 1984. There has to be some Emmanuel Goldstein out there who's keeping the people from having, what they need.
And boy, am I glad that we are starting Animal Farm today.
Yeah, me too.
Right, but go ahead.
But so I can't identify. I don't know enough about New York City politics, to be honest with you. I just don't, to know what the power base is and how, the old donor class that went through Chuck Schumer is obviously standing, with their dicks in their hands right now. He was the gatekeeper. He really was. He's just been completely outflanked. And as I say, I look at the old Sharpies as very likely to let Mamdani talk and go out front and be the boy band leader. But I just think they're going to take him to the cleaners.
Yeah, maybe that's what's happening. I mean, to me, there's such a stark difference between Bernie Sanders, who really did grow up poor and in New York, and in an ethnic community that was struggling and owed a lot to the Democratic Party of that time period, and this new incarnation, represented by Platner and Mamdani, and what's his face in Minnesota, the mayor there. But these are upper class. Like these are basically the people we went to school with, or at least
absolutely they are. They are,
right.
Yeah.
And when I was in school, it was a much more sort of tepid version of leftism. It was kind of ameliorative, I would say, right? It was let's get some social programming to to soften the hard edges of capitalism. Let's let's shift some money from defense to this. Let's invest a little bit more in maybe even really in childcare programming, and spend less on the back end on prisons and that sort of thing, right? But it wasn't, let's seize the means of production, and
but we live in a country with two parallel economies. The public sector is almost as big as the private sector now, and I think they're seesawing back and forth for dominance. If you go to California and you think of it as a liberal state, well, they've got their prison system is a bigger employer and a bigger influence in that state than almost any other public sector actor. I think there might be as many guards as there are teachers in California. So it may just be a competition for the spoils of taxation and NGO style, cooperation between public and private. But I can't help but see a play being established, like that. This is the level of crazy rhetoric that can't be really backed up even by a fact check suggests to me that we're in a theatrical moment in which they're going to go to like crazy war with them, as Andrew Sullivan suggested, and it's going to be a kind of seesaw battle for attention, for enthusiasm, and so on, with results no longer that big a factor.
But look, could we both agree that this is exactly the politician that Donald Trump wants to run against? I mean, if Hillary was the perfect candidate in 2016, I mean, he wouldn't be running. But in other words,
you mean in the midterms?
Yeah, or in the midterms, or whoever the candidate is in 2024. They want to run against Zoran. Like, that's the person they want to run against. They want to run against a Muslim in New York who says that the real tragedy, as you said, it's the Norm Macdonald joke, right? What was it again?
My biggest fear in America is that a dirty bomb will go off and kill 50 million Americans. Can you imagine the backlash against innocent Muslims?
Right.
But Matt, what's going to happen in the New Jersey race? Who's going to be governor? I mean, right across the border, across the river, New Jersey seems to be swinging somewhat right.
Yes, that's partly because the candidate who happens to be my congresswoman is flailing, is caught up in a Stock Act situation that she hasn't been able to answer very well. So Mikey Sherrill, we'll see. Jersey has an interesting history politically. It does. It will occasionally swing to the right, and we'll see what happens. I just think this is fascinating. Like, there is a desire. There's clearly a desire on the part of the Republicans to make Zoran the face of the Democratic Party, but he is de facto becoming the face of the Democratic Party because they've run out of other ideas. I mean, the only other candidate generating any sort of national heat right now is Abigail Spanberger, who's a CIA vet, right? And how many times have they tried that old canard, right? The ex-CIA or ex-military person who happens to be a kind of neoliberal WEF.
How's Hakeem hanging in there? I mean, is he riding the tiger? Successfully, or
I don't know. We'll see. We'll have to see how long he holds on to his leadership position. I'm assuming his seat is safe.
Right.
But well, let's get to another topic because we're gonna talk about this with Animal Farm. Do we think that there was a point in time when they just stopped teaching what happened with communism to upper class kids? Because I'm pretty sure our generation did learn all of the bad or most of the bad stuff. So
I mean, I learned so much. I tweeted the other day that growing up, and I did actually grow up in a working class area of Minnesota, and I went to public school with kids, who came to school with manure on their boots, or had to get out of school. So, because they were milking and somebody was sick who usually did it or whatever. I believed that there was a kid in the Soviet Union who I was in direct competition with, and I had to climb a rope, do push-ups, learn, math and reading in order to someday face down that threat. There was a permeating anti-communism to American life at that time, during the Cold War. You almost didn't know what it was. You read books like Animal Farm, and they almost didn't tell you that it was about communism.
No, they didn't. Yeah, that's
they
true.
didn't. You read 1984, and they almost didn't tell you what it was about. It was just really about those baddies that weren't American, that weren't free, and so on. And so I have to confess to absolutely being, soaked in that. And becoming aware of it later when I went off to an Eastern college and saw, the various ways in which I had been raised to be a Cold War kid, was a bit of an awakening. But I only really learned about communism, the Russian Revolution, Stalin, and the switch from World War II
Gulags,
alliance,
Britain.
and the gulags on my own.
Yeah.
It's funny. We think back and think that it was a thorough education in anti-communism, but it was more an education in what we were told was anti-Americanism. And still, when I read Animal Farm today, as we just did, its subtleties of allegory about the ins and outs of the Russian Revolution, some of them I'm learning about for the first time.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And the few things that I did learn in school about, because we learned, I feel like my education stressed both sort of the positive aspects of the leftist liberation movements in America in the 60s and 50s. We read books like Soul on Ice, right? The autobiography of Malcolm X.
Black Like Me.
Black Like Me. Yeah.
Founder, etc. It's interesting in a weird way in the 1970s in Minnesota how leftist my public school education was. I mean, way more. Every once in a while, we saw what I would consider a conservative or right-wing video about how they make aluminum or, our wonderful army or something. But that was a rarity. Mostly we were being steeped in what you call, left liberalism that you described properly before. One of the reasons I so resent being called a racist later in life is that, I came up in the most unracist, absolutely.
It was the worst thing to even contemplate being in the 70s or 80s.
I was on the hunt for adults looking, saying something racist. We were then run, a game was run on us where we were told, after having felt that we'd solved all these problems, we were told that actually we were the problem all over again. And it was like, what?
So to at Jace7483, who says you'd have to be brain dead and not realize Animal Farm is about communism. Maybe, but if you're 13 years old and reading it in school,
how do you know what communism is?
Yeah, exactly. The subtleties are a little bit lost. on you. And some of the other things, the other aspects of what happened in the Russian Revolution, and especially the parts about how there were leading roles played by upper class rich kids who got their hands on power and kind of used working class rhetoric to create an authoritarian state. That was something that I only got from reading books like The Possessed,
Uh-huh.
The Bolsheviks, which is a biography of Lenin I had to read as a Russian in a Russian studies class. The Great Terror by Robert Conquest, right? The Gulag Archipelago, but a lot of those books I read on my own, Kalima Tales, things like that. This whole story, which I feel like is coming back now and is very much part of the Animal Farm theme, of upper class people who don't really know what they're doing and blundering into or cynically using these ideas as a route to seizing power, is something that I think people were better educated about maybe 50 years ago than they are now. It feels like.
So when I got to Princeton University from Taylor's Falls Public High School, a school which is now closed because the rural area that it serves is so depopulated that there are not enough kids. When I got to Princeton, I found out that the biggest fans of reggae, the music of the oppressed Jamaican, not just working class, but just impoverished class, were the richest kids at school. I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out why the Grateful Dead people who were, going off for the weekend to see this, hippie band were the richest kids in school. That inversion was not something I was completely prepared for. And I think it takes a long time for Americans, especially, to realize that things aren't as they seem. We like to make quick decisions and we like to think that everybody's straightforward. But to realize, looking back, that the revolutionary movements have often been run by the most pampered and kind of, unrealistic people in society, it's a little complex for the American mind.
Yeah, I guess that's true. And as God's Child 2020 points out, especially at an age when people don't really read books, that's kind of a hard topic. It's a concept that might be a little bit deep for this generation of political consumers. Maybe I don't know.
In general, I think Americans are overconfident about their ability to see real radical political movements, but to see power flexing in an authoritarian way. I think during COVID, we were caught up short. We saw all these edicts come down that, borderline unconstitutional or they're closing your church. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
And they were caught flat-footed. I think they are maybe being a little caught flat-footed in this case. You're probably right. Even though I am emphasizing its theatrical nature, people may not realize, this is how it goes. These are the people who do it. And, these are the promises that get made. And we know kind of where it ends up, or where it has ended up in the past.
Right. And that's where we're going to get to with Animal Farm. But, and that was the thing, as a young person, in the former Soviet Union and in the Soviet Union and former Soviet Union, the thing that you learn from everybody is that every single promise that is made in the name of the working class or whoever in that society was appropriated by scoundrels and thieves and intellectuals who used it to get themselves better apartments and and to suppress their enemies and that sort of thing. I mean, there was a sort of a built-in suspicion of sort of the upper class intellectual. It was one of the things that really hurt the American-backed reform movement in the Yeltsin years, is because so many of the advisors to Yeltsin reminded Russians of the sort of slick intellectual, who tended to be at the forefront of the revolutionary period. But I just don't think Americans have the same inherent fear of that kind of character. They haven't been victimized by it to that degree yet.
But it's unclear to me how somebody like Mamdani, can they really forge a separate peace within New York City? You know what I mean? Like he's promising everything, and the city is the only thing he has control over that could possibly deliver it. But what is it to have a revolutionary, movement or pseudo or quasi within the context of the United States of America? And then when I see Bernie talking, I'm like, Bernie, here's the difference between when your rhetoric was fresh and now. We're in like a zillion times more debt. Okay, like all you keep talking as though the billionaire measurement is the measurement of America's wealth. It is in some ways, but the debt measurement is
I was going to say it's the Chinese bondholder.
Exactly.
Right.
What is it to promise free things in the most dire deficit situation the country has ever seen itself? It's one thing back in Minnesota when I was young and you had a corporate headquarters, all on every other block in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and you had a pretty good economy and you wanted to share the wealth, but sharing the debt.
Well, again, that's what I think the interesting thing is about this Mamdani phenomenon. Will the Democrats feel obligated to make him help him succeed initially by funneling state money in his direction, or will they let him fall on his face? My guess is that the Schumers of the world are going to be inclined toward the latter course.
They may just retire to their chambers, what I mean?
True, yeah.
And just talk about the old days. It is interesting that zealot
red stripe until they die.
Yeah. But zealots can hold everybody around them hostage because, like you say, it may be too good to fail at first. Like, wow, if we don't get behind this thing, if we don't pretend or even actually give it real resources, we'll all go down with the ship.
Yeah.
It's a very Russian situation in which the zealot, in which the sort of prophet person is supported to the point where everything crashes down. There is we don't have a tragic sense in America, but there is a tragic possibility here where, it's a little bit like being there only with loud, sloganeering.
Well, I think that's a good segue to Animal Farm. One last thing I want to say though is that you mentioned Bernie. I used to have so much respect for Bernie, but he went out of his way to describe Platner as a working class candidate, right? And I just feel like that it's such a repudiation and such a betrayal of what he would have done previously, or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he was always like that, but the whole Platner thing just seems like such a ripoff, and to have him endorse it so heartily, and then overlooking the tattoo feels kind of like a small thing compared to that. But whatever. Anyway, let's get on to Animal Farm. Everybody
Yeah.
wanted us to read this book. It's a classic. It's short, and it's an allegory. Are there any? How many other books this famous are allegories, Walter?
Not quite like this. I mean, he literally called it a fairy tale on
Yeah.
as a subtitle in England. I mean, you put me on the spot there, but it is unique in the sense that it is probably considered one of the great novels of the 20th century, and there aren't many that use this mode because it's a really difficult mode. And I'll tell you, the funny thing is, though we say it's short and everything, my wife and I both agreed that when we picked up Animal Farms as adults, we were like, did we read like simplified versions as kids? Because this is actually more complex and dense than we remembered. I remembered it as almost a, Stuart Little or a children's book.
Right. Yeah. Something that could be that you would need multiple illustrations just to fill out the book enough to make a book. Right.
Right.
But no, yeah, it's Animal Farm: A Fairy Story is the title, and it begins in this really interesting way. It says Mr. Jones of the Manor Farm had locked the hen houses for the night, but was too drunk to remember to shut the pop holes. With the ring of light from his lantern dancing from side to side, he lurched across the yard, kicked off his boots at the back door, drew himself a last glass of beer from the barrel of the scullery, and made his way up to bed, where Mrs. Jones was already snoring. And then the action begins, where there is a big white boar named Major who has had a dream, and we're going to hear all about this dream. So this essentially the book takes place on a farm. The villain, it begins with the villain who are the farmers, the Joneses, and immediately we move into the barn, and we hear about this story. Walter, do you want to is there anything you want to say about the setup before we get into some of the quotes from this? Because
well, historically, I think the thing to recognize about this book is that George Orwell was a democratic socialist. In other words, he had enough hope for socialism that he was willing to criticize Soviet communism. Most of the great critiques of communist and Stalinist, in particular, overreach were by people who had hopes for the movement or still had them. The enemy, the reactionary, will just demonize you. It's your own side that will see right through your, your posturing. So this farm is obviously, like all farms, the entirety of the world or the entirety of England or the entirety of a society. The farmer is the oppressor, very simply. He's human. And the first revolutionary moment in the book is Major's dream, in which he says, hey, if humans weren't telling us what to do, weren't just feeding us enough to do our work, and then, making us expend every last calorie, if they were giving us back some of the surplus that they create, we'd be free. It's Mamdani's dream. It really is. Like, it's what Bernie just said.
If not for the oligarchs.
Yeah. How in this rich society have we so little, and the funny thing about Orwell is that these are all farm animals. None of them went to Hotchkiss. In other words, none of them are actually, infiltrators from the upper classes and not really animals. That's the mind-bending part of this current predicament. In this one, they're all actual farm animals with a legitimate grievance, which is that they're sent off to slaughter. They're fed just enough so that they can
work to death. Yeah,
they're worked to death. You sympathize with them, and the farmers are drunk.
Absolutely, and Look, there's probably a reference here to the real world progression of the Russian Revolution, right? Lenin's will, his testament, the dying revolutionary leader, reportedly told,
Right.
right? So there's a hint of that in this, which is that Major's dream is going to become the sacred text of the movement, much in the way that the sort of post-Lenin history of the Soviet Union was a lot about reading the doctrine of Lenin's words, or making this or that mean support for future programming. But what you said about the essential point, I think, was summed up in this part of Major's speech, which is where he says, "Is it not crystal clear then, comrades, that all the evils of this life of ours spring from the tyranny of human beings?" Right? So he gives this very eloquent, very enraging, passionate speech about the mistreatment of farm animals at the hands of the Jones the farmer, and builds up to this point where he says, he's even set us animals against one another. We have to realize our common interests, and once we do, we will be free. Once we realize that there is an oppressor that we can be rid of, then we can finally be free and graduate into a higher form of existence. And it's kind of convincing at the beginning of the story, isn't it?
Well, you see, we're looking at it now with knowledge of what it's about, and adult educations and so on. But as a kid, when I read it, and not knowing what was coming, I remember thinking, this is going to be a book about success. It didn't seem like a doomed experiment. Even now, it's hard to get in the mindset of the excited animals when you know how Animal Farm really ends, or what it really connotes and what it means. And this time, reading it with that sort of retrospective wisdom, or knowledge at least, I feared for the animals almost instantly, because I know what a crushing job Orwell's going to do of dashing their hopes and exposing them. And I almost didn't want to see the whip come down. You know what I mean? I almost wish the book was longer and dwelt longer in the idyllic early part.
Yeah, no, unfortunately there's no respite in this book. It starts off in conflict, misery, and it's only going to get worse, right?
Yeah.
And the setup that you see coming early on is this sort of primitive, false, Major's old and he's about to die, right? And maybe he's sincere in his belief that animals are a higher form of life, and wouldn't succumb to the same kind of temptations to oppress that human beings would. And maybe he's genuinely believes that things will be better.
Almost when he died, at what point do you feel the thing turning? You know what I mean? What's the first foreshadowing of disaster for you?
So in the first chapter, at the end of his speech, the speech is sort of deeply radical.
It's I have a dream. In a way, I mean, it's more us and them than that. But
yeah, that's what I mean. So there's this part. Never listen when they tell you that man and the animals have a common interest, that the prosperity of the one is the prosperity of the others. It is all lies. Man serves the interest of no creature except himself. And among us animals, let there be perfect unity, perfect comradeship in the struggle. All men are enemies. All animals are comrades. And I'm sorry, that's AOC's speech right there, right?
Okay, so you're absolutely right. And you know what? And you know what rings false or ominous in that speech? perfect, all. In other words, one of the reasons why I didn't necessarily detect anti-communism when I was a kid in this was that what I saw it was dreaming. In other words, utopianism. You know, you can't have dystopian fiction without utopian pretensions. And as soon as you hear that speech of that, you know, that dying animal, you're like, none of this can come true. Perfection can't be real. Absolute enmity can't be real. Any statement that begins with all can't be real. And you just know this is a balloon blown up to pop. You much earlier than I thought the turn came. The turn comes at the beginning.
Yeah, and is that out of ignorance or inexperience because they've never been in charge of anything before, or is it?
Well, that's definitely one of the themes of the book is inexperience, and
Right.
that's what I was emphasizing with Mamdani. I think he's going to be out of his depth, but early on in the book, as they try to bring in the harvest, you know, and so on, you go like, you guys just don't know how to do stuff. You know, it's just piling on one portent after another. You overpromised. You don't know how things work. You've got a absolute ideology which isn't built for life.
Yeah, and also early in the speech, they also lay out Major, who they described as the prize middle white boar. I had also remembered this character as a horse, believe it or not, but it is a boar.
Right.
But in the speech, Major lays out the case that animals are actually better than people, and that people are morally inferior, and almost a parasitic form of life form. Man is the only creature that consumes without producing. He does not give milk. He does not lay eggs. He is too weak to pull the plow. He cannot run fast enough to catch rabbits. Yet he is lord of all the animals. He sets them to work. He gives back to them the bare minimum that will prevent them from starving, and the rest he keeps for himself. And this is right away. They're setting up this idea that evil is something that's exclusive to people, and among animals, once the people are out of the picture, things will be beautiful. As you say, it will be perfect, right? And nothing is perfect, as we know in life.
You're absolutely right. And what's interesting about that speech, and it reminded me of again of AOC, is that when people get their basic facts wrong, there's something to be feared. And when he talks about what people don't, something with the plow, he skips over the fact that people invented the plow.
Right.
You
exactly.
know, there's so much there that is taken for granted in the list of what people's deficiencies are. There is behind them a human triumph that goes unmentioned, you know, the invention of farming.
Yeah.
And so on. And that's what's scary about that rhetoric in real life too. When you're not really telling us how New York was settled, when you're actually either don't know or you're lying about it, then the bomb is already ticking, because whatever that reality is that you're suppressing or sidelining is the one that's going to come for you. And the animals, by completely demeaning human intelligence, capabilities, work, and so on, have already sealed their doom.
Right, because what they don't realize is, and this is the generous interpretation of what's about to happen in the book, is that because of their inexperience, because of the novelty of self-governance, that they're not aware that they're going to have to make difficult decisions once with power,
And they're later going to become dependent on humans.
right. Yeah, exactly. And they're going to become the very thing that they themselves despise the most. And I don't know. I mean, I saw this so much over in Russia. Like, for instance, trade unions. Where you would you'd see a factory, maybe, right, that was that was once run by rich czarist industrialists. In the Soviet period, was taken over by the trade unions, but the unions stopped being unions pretty quickly. They just move into the management and eliminate trade unions. You know what I'm saying? Like the Soviets were inexperienced with running a country, and so they eliminated they just saw things like trade unions as enemies to their rule and irritants, and just wiped them out and made them illegal, making it even worse than what went on during the Tsarist period. And that's what's going to happen, obviously, in this book, is that they're under the knout of the Farmer Jones, and some of the animals, we're going to get to the line, some animals are more equal than others, but the ones that are more equal are going to prey upon the rest, right? And just the inability to see that coming is kind of amazing in retrospect, right? I mean, I guess it could only happen if you've never had the experience of any life experience before. I don't know.
There are people from South America, there are people from Eastern Europe who look at Mamdani or anywhere else in the world, and they already know the ending. Okay, they know the ending. That's what's freaking them out right now. It's like, I have seen 100 stories start this way, and I know how they end. Just as when we go into Animal House again as adults, we know how it ends. We can feel the seeds of its destruction in almost the second paragraph. And it's really hard for people who are older, from other places or whatever it is, to watch a phenomena play out that they already know the ending of, and to hear their warnings go unheeded, and hear their wisdom trampled on and called, reactionary fear or whatever. And so in some ways, I look at Mamdani as I do at the very beginning of Animal Farm. I'm like already trying to figure out which aspects of his presentation and his rhetoric are going to contribute to the
downfall,
to the tragedy.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like I don't have any doubt about that, about the tragedy. I know that's going to happen. I just don't know exactly how it's going to play out, just as I can't quite remember in the beginning of Animal Farm how it plays out.
Yeah, no, that is a good point. Like, what's going to be the end game for Mamdani? I mean, look, I think it's entirely possible that he'll become electorally successful, and that this movement will spread significantly for a bit. I just think that there is an inevitable bad ending that's coming. We just don't know where it's going to happen yet.
The great thing about this book is that it seems to almost describe laws of nature. You know what I mean? The reason that it's so bracing is that you can't, the way it's set up, you can't imagine any other course of events or any other ending or so on. It seems to be kind of a case closed book, and opening it up again, I want to not read it as a case closed book. I want to, rediscover, the weight the places at which it could have taken other turns, and be surprised by it again. But looking at Mamdani, I see a case closed book starting. And it might be my temperament, my age, might be my education, a million things, but it's hard to watch. It's like watching real life Animal Farm.
Yeah, exactly. Just to take an example, at the beginning of the second chapter of the book, Orwell introduces basically the deadly idea, the thing that will kill the movement. 3 nights later, old Major died peacefully in his sleep. His body was buried at the foot of the orchard. This was early in March. During the next 3 months, there was much secret activity. Major's speech had given to the more intelligent animals on the farm a completely new outlook on life. They did not know when the rebellion predicted by Major would take place. They had no reason for thinking that it would be within their own lifetime, but they saw clearly that it was their duty to prepare for it. And so this is the birth of vanguardism, right? It's the idea that a movement for all must be led by the more capable, right?
Matt, you know what also it has in common with what's going on in New York? When their little revolution comes, it's shockingly easy. It happens it almost happens like a house of cards falling. They're suddenly in possession of the keys. It's not a big struggle. Right.
And that's true. And that's happened over and over again in history, right? I mean, even Lenin and all those guys were relatively surprised by how easy it was to seize power. Of course, it required some extraordinary circumstances in the middle of a world war and some other things, but this idea that, well, we can't just leave it to the organic process of the working class rising up at some point. We, the more enlightened, intelligent folk who see the truth, have to lead this thing and strategize and exercise power on behalf of the true and inevitable movement. And that has happened in every single one of the socialist uprisings in history, right? Like, well, maybe not every single one, but in a lot of them, there has been this vanguard class that's risen up.
Yes,
and part of the ethos of being secretly smarter and in charge is that you assume the right to lie on behalf of the movement. You're already withholding certain things from the other animals in the farm, right? And we already see this with this movement. You see Mamdani giving this speech about how, well, we don't have the support for all the things that we would want, like seizing the means of production. So we'll wait. We'll talk about the things that people are ready for, and then when the time comes, we'll talk about those other things so that we can bring people to those things, right? So they're already laying out this idea of, we'll strategize, we'll decide when to play which cards, as opposed to just letting the movement organically happen.
So this is an interesting phenomenon, but Bruce Springsteen, they made a biopic of Bruce Springsteen, and it's bombing. And I saw an essay the other day which said the reason is that Bruce Springsteen was actually an authentic working class hero. And then he started going off on yachts and, becoming a sort of a World Economic Foundation marquee partier along with David Geffen and Barack and so on. And just nobody buys it anymore. Well, this is the opposite trajectory where, the privileged people are going to try to turn themselves into working class heroes. In this book, the pigs are given intelligence above the other. Orwell almost believes in a form of racism or speciesism. we're to believe the pigs are just smarter than the other animals. The other animals try to learn to read. They never succeed. They try to, they can't even, memorize the alphabet. So not only are the pigs a vanguard, but they are actually superior. They have superior skills. And part of the story that Orwell is telling is that each of these animals has a nature. There's a horse that I forgot, a mare that's very pretty and likes to have ribbons in her hair. And her first question about the revolution is, will there still be sugar afterwards? Will I still be able to wear ribbons? And more than I remembered, what he's saying is that every animal's nature it can't be melded into this one class. They never overcome their imprinted species-based differences, frankly. I think one thing he's saying is that there is no revolutionary class as such. The idea that everybody can be blended into that is one thing that he's criticizing. And I think when he called the book a fairy story, Orwell was sophisticated enough. What he meant by that is the fairy story is the fairy story of Stalinism.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And the whole idea that all animals are comrades, I mean, you're right. It falls apart in this passage. The stupidest questions of all were asked by Molly, the white mare. The very first question she asked Snowball, who's a pig, was, will there still be sugar after the rebellion? No, said Snowball firmly. We will have no means of making sugar on this farm. Besides, you do not need sugar. You'll have all the oats and hay you want. And shall I be allowed to wear ribbons in my mane? Asked Molly. Comrade, said Snowball, those ribbons are that you are so devoted to are the badge of slavery. Can you not understand that liberty is worth more than ribbons? Molly agreed, but she did not sound very convinced. And so already, there's concessions, right? Authority, and there's the pigs are essentially exercising authority. Within that, once they do that, the game's basically up, right? There's not going to be any natural all animals are comrades once these divisions are revealed, and once the fact that some animals are going to exercise power over others is revealed to take place.
The pigs are going to end up at the French Laundry. We know that. And one of the reasons that this book is so powerful is that it has been affirmed. It was written in 1945, or it was published in 1945. And it's been affirmed again and again on an almost semi-annual basis in country after country and society after society. That's why I didn't think it was about communism as a kid. What I thought it was about was deception, hypocrisy, selfishness, and the fantasy of believing that everybody can be made equal when they're not the same.
Right.
So how I didn't know much about communism. All I knew that the Soviet Union was a place that had a dictator and some rockets with nuclear bombs aimed at us.
Right. Upper Volta with rockets. Yeah.
I thought this was about human nature.
Right.
This book. Yeah,
and it is. Absolutely. It just so happens that it's an allegory that perfectly matches what happened after Lenin died.
Right.
When all of the pigs who in the party who were interpreting the true faith for the actual proletariat in Russia, and constantly changing their mind and forcing people to you make concessions that they might not have agreed to in the beginning. The Russian peasants didn't like to have to give up the idea that they could sell a few things here and there, and have a nicer horse or mule than their neighbors or whatever it is. Like that wasn't a thing that came naturally to the people in the countryside, but the pigs who were in charge, sure made quick work of the sort of old notions of how life was, and and their religious devotion. You know, that was something a little minor thing they had to give up in order to live in this new paradise.
Do you think if you gave this book to a 20-year-old who hadn't read it, who was enthralled with AOC and Mamdani and so on, that they would recognize that this was a commentary on what they're seeing?
No.
Or you don't think they would? They'd even...
I continually run into this. I feel like we're in this new space where knowledge of what actually happened, you know, not just in Russia, but in China, in Cambodia, you know, all these other places in the world, but particularly with the original Soviet Revolution, which is so thoroughly documented and has been so completely dissected, and almost nobody knows anything about it in this country, and especially the gruesome, horrible, extremely violent, and disgusting parts. I mean, the notion of somebody wearing a death's head tattoo is immediately controversial because it conjures images of death camps. But there were death camps of basically almost equal stature in the other revolution, and it's like most people haven't even heard of it. Somehow they think the gulags were a lesser phenomenon.
Well, you know what's now on reflection, what's so freaky about AOC's account of how New York City was settled is how much of it was settled by people fleeing communism and socialism.
Well, absolutely.
And she left it completely out. And I can't imagine what it's like to be a New Yorker who came from that background watching this happen again. It's like, you know.
She should go visit Brighton Beach and ask all the people who came over in the late 70s. And, you know, well, that was just the last wave of people. But, you know, the people in the 20s, 30s, a lot of Jews came over right from the Pale. You know, yeah, there were so many refugees from communist countries throughout this, you know, throughout the period after the 1917. Yeah, she left all of that out, and that you're right. That's kind of an amazing omission when you think about it.
People fleeing the Holocaust. No, Holocaust, you didn't get to flee, except for a few. Some people fled the rise of fascism. Yes, you know, seeing in prospect that there might be a Holocaust, but the Holocaust was not something that you left. But Russia, you did. Eastern Europe, you did. And the willingness to not tell the truth, or the ignorance of the truth, suggests to me that you're right. They wouldn't learn anything from Animal Farm. They don't have the chops to know what's being said. But I don't know that I did as a kid. Like I said, I thought it was about hypocrisy, selfishness, and how naturally people would take more until it was all gone, you know.
Right. But that's one of the reasons why I think this book works. Even though he's clearly following, he's clearly using the actual historical facts of the Soviet Revolution as a guide to the plot. It works on its own as an allegory, because all the things that happen in it ring true. It rings true that that these animals on a farm are mistreated, and if they were to suddenly have consciousness and be inspired by a dream that revealed to them the awfulness of their position, they might very well get together and decide, you know, at some future time, we're going to be rid of people and things will be better. That's true, but it's also true that if there were pigs that were smarter, that they would do this. They would ruin the thing from the very beginning, right? And that's why the story works for me.
As Orwell understood it, the problem was that they weren't real communists. The problem was that they betrayed the principles. I don't think that he came out of this not believing in Marxism or in the British versions of socialist equity and so on. I think he believed that this was a tragedy. But there's an interesting feature of the book that I read about, which is that somebody who had fled Stalin came to him and said, as he was about to publish the book, Stalin saved Russia from Germany by being such a bastard, such a horrible, intransigent, grandiose, selfish dictator. He stood his ground. He did not flee, and he saved the Soviet Union from the German Nazi, invasion. And Orwell had to take that into account, he said, that there was actually a virtue to this kind of a tyrant in certain historical situations. That's a complexity that I never understood before,
Yeah, I mean it's complicated because there was originally a truce, and the thing that Stalin wanted more than ever was to be Hitler's friend, so that Hitler would never invade. And then when Hitler broke the deal, Stalin, was initially paralyzed, but then he did eventually, mobilize the country. It was significantly at a disadvantage because he had massacred most of the general staff of the armed forces because he was afraid of them in the purges of 37 and 38. But it is true that the Soviet Union, suffering much more than we did during World War II, with casualties far beyond what we could even conceive of, that they did beat back the Nazis, and without that, where would the world be? You do have to take that into consideration. But I do think it's interesting that his bigger doubts, Orwell's bigger doubts about socialism in general, was shown through more in the later book in 1984, right? Yeah. Because this book is, as you say, this is an allegory about the misuse of power that ruins a beautiful dream, right?
And I read something really interesting. T.S. Eliot, the famous poet, was at that time the head of a British publishing house, Faber and Faber. And Orwell sent this book to Eliot. And Eliot was a high Anglican Christian, traditionalist, classicist, and so on. Okay. A snob. And Eliot read the book and rejected it. And he said, I don't think your scheme, I don't think your satirical or allegorical point here is one that you make successfully. He said, if the pigs had just been more public spirited, if they had been better pigs, none of this would have happened. In other words, you think you've solved this, almost logical problem about the destiny of this kind of a totalitarian socialist society. But really, if the pigs had just been a little better, none of it would have happened. It's a kind of interesting and I think trenchant criticism of the book.
Yes, but okay, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
But maybe only those kind of pigs take over.
So no, but I disagree though. So because I think inherently what happens is, this system requires only one power. Right, there can't be competing power centers in this kind of government. There has to be power, has to be concentrated, and it has to be total. The means of production can't be left partially unseized. They have to be completely seized. And so for me, the inherent problem that you always end up with this sort of proposition is that there's going to be a total concentration of power, and that never ends up anywhere except awful. I don't think when human
Well,
beings
yeah,
are involved.
I brought up Eliot's criticism. He failed. He's a footnote in history. Orwell proved his point over and over 1,000,000 times beyond T.S. Eliot's point. Well, if they'd had nicer, pigs, it would have been a different outcome. So you're right. I mean, it's just interesting to see how people who had not yet been steeped in the legend of Animal Farm saw it the first time it came across their desk.
But I think that is still how people look at this, though. They think, and as one of our listeners pointed out, what people usually say is that, well, that wasn't really socialism, that wasn't really communism before.
Right.
In all these other instances, it was a corruption of the true thing. And so if we just do it right, it'll work perfectly. Whereas, I think experience will tell you. The reason I'm such a fan of the American system is that it deeply analyzed human nature at the very beginning of the project and said, if we do this, it's going to end up badly. We're going to end up with a tyrant even worse than the one that we're throwing over.
It didn't rely on changing human nature,
right,
or melting everybody into a new kind of being, socialist man or whatever, as a precondition for success. And Matt, you're really right here. This book is an inevitable tragedy and an inevitable unwinding of an initial error. But I think it is in following that original fairy tale. Like, whenever everything goes wrong before you even know it, when you follow a fairy tale. After that, all you're going to do is take reality's revenge on the chops over and over and over. And it's the fairy tale nature of these campaigns that we're seeing. I mean, Donald Trump, yeah, he has his fairy tale. America was great, and we're going to get back to it, and da-da-da-da.
How much? Go ahead. I'm sorry. It's just
But it's
he's not earnest about. But
ahead. Exactly. He's not earnest about it. That's the funny thing about Donald Trump. He's like a Mark Twain character. He's like a riverboat character. We know the salesman. We know the salesman is somebody who's trying to get us to sell ourselves. And, we know the difference between whether the Bassomatic can really do all the dicing and slicing it claims, but it can do some. And it's good to be hyped about it. Whatever. These other people, this is real, like AOC especially there. This is revolutionary fervor. This is crazy stuff. This is lying about history. This is not even knowing about history or thinking it's important to know. And Madani is just cynical. I mean, the sine qua non is fakery, is fake crying. You know what I mean?
I know. No, it's awful. And look, I had an experience. I'll probably write about it someday where, I was in a mine in Russia at a time when there were just horrible industrial accidents because the new crooks who were running the mine who were, just as bad as the communists who came before. Actually, the problem was they weren't quite just as bad. The people who ran it before, they weren't just thieves like the people in the Yeltsin era. People in the Yeltsin era just wanted to steal the coal, right? In the Soviet era, they had belief. And as a result, there were railways that were built that are literally built atop ground human bone from the slave laborers who were forced to construct 1,000 kilometers of railway to this coal site. And so the people there, what they feared more than anything was earnestness, belief, fervor, right? And as bad as the crooks were who were running the thing, that by the time I got there, it was like the lesser of two evils for them, because they had seen the other version, right? Like
the fairy tale believers are the more dangerous.
Right. It's and that's my inarticulate way of getting back to my original point, which is it's the Graham Plattner, Mamdani, AOC intellectual, like pseudo intellectual, who really, really, really believes, who scares me more than any other kind of character on earth, right? Because belief will get you in a lot more problems than cynicism and thievery, I think. You know what I mean? But I don't know. At least that I think that's the message of this book, is that these things inevitably get corrupted, right?
And also, they have their 7 commandments at the beginning of the book, and then they get caught breaking them, so they have to change the commandments, and then finally they just get rid of the commandments and have only one. What the dangerous part is, after the promises have been made and they start not performing, they start not meeting the quotas, they start getting caught being selfish or non-democratic socialist, then the excuses start. Then the scapegoating starts. Then the lying and making you lie to yourself starts. And then the terror comes.
Right. Yeah. So here in the beginning, it's just a gentle warning about the ribbons. It's going to get worse.
Right.
So we're just being introduced at the beginning of this book to the dream. It's not yet completely fucked up, or it hasn't gone wrong yet, but they've already planted the seeds for how it's going to go wrong. And I think it's great that we're doing this book at this moment, because it's a revival of this plot in America, in a place where we haven't seen it in a while. So it should be really interesting.
It's a little bit like a play-by-play. I mean, we're giving you a preview. I personally don't want the preview to be accurate in some ways, but in another way, I do want it to be accurate, because I want to cure us for the 100,000th time of this delusion. But there's the other part of me that goes, why not have free fast buses? Why not have da-da-da-da? That's still in me. And that's the part of me and others that gets a guy like this elected. Unfortunately, the 3/4 rest of me can watch this train crash into a wall from a distance, and know.
But they've already adopted exactly the platform of this book. It's in the book, it's human beings are the oppressors, and once we get rid of the oppressors, then we'll be fine. The new theology in universities is oppressors and oppressed. So once we get rid of the patriarchy and the old system and all of the good characters that AOC rattled off, once they have perfect comradeship, once we just get rid of those bad oppressors, things will be fine. It really is the same thing, and I just don't think they know how inherently flawed that thinking is. But we'll see. We'll go.
One last thing, and I mean, it's such a provocative book, and it really gets you thinking. One thing that I think Orwell is saying also is that nature exists. In other words, I think one of the reasons that we've got Mamdani and right now is that this technological age of ours has kind of convinced us that reality is what we make it. That it all can be shaped. We can AI program our own movies. That we've triumphed over certain old barriers and limitations that we don't even really recognize as existing. But in Animal Farm, you realize very early when they're bringing in the hay crop, and then when they have some apples come down in a wind, that, whoa, there's one thing that they didn't figure out, which is nature. And they're up against nature, and they're still in a battle with it. And they think that we're in a battle with humans, but they're in a battle with their own selves, and they're in a battle with the weather, literally, and land and the capacities of the land. And as you say, in the Soviet Union, it was the revenge in some ways of nature, the revenge of the weather, the revenge of the ground that undoes utopianism.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a perfect allegory for what we're going through now. They don't see that they're in a battle with nature. They don't see that nature even plays a role in any of this stuff. But we'll see how it goes. Anyway, I think if you haven't picked up the book yet, please do. It's an amazing reflection on this exact moment. So it should be a fun couple of weeks. So anyway, well, thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you later this week. Thanks a lot, Walter.
Talk to you then.
Talk to you soon.